Today, the number of Australian coronavirus cases reaches 200 as the opposition calls for Cabinet to follow its own advice after the Home Affairs Minister tests positive to COVID-19.
This confusion and this apparent disconnect between what they are doing and what they are telling others is very concerning.
Also ahead, New Zealand cancels its National Remembrance Service for victims of the Christchurch mosque attacks over COVID-19 concerns. US President Donald Trump declares a national emergency as both sides of politics reach a deal on a sweeping relief package. And as the coronavirus spreads across the globe, Europe is declared the new epicentre of the pandemic. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Corowa. First, let's check the weather for the capital cities. Partly cloudy in Brisbane and Melbourne. Rain at times in Sydney. Showers in Canberra. Overcast in Hobart. Sunshine for Adelaide. A rainy day in Perth. And partly cloudy for Darwin. Australia has now reached 200 coronavirus cases after 3 more were confirmed in South Australia. Overnight, the federal government was rocked by news that one of its most senior ministers, Peter Dutton, was admitted to hospital after testing positive for coronavirus. The Prime Minister says he doesn't need to be tested, but he has decided to cancel plans to attend a rugby league game tonight. Political reporter Anna Henderson joins us now from Parliament House. So Anna, they've been raising concerns now about the Prime Minister's approach to Peter Dutton's diagnosis. What's the argument there?
Well, Miriam, we just heard from the Shadow Health Minister, Chris Bowen, who was talking about what seems to be, in his view, mixed messaging on how people should respond if they have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. So Chris Bowen's point is that at this stage, we know Peter Dutton has been diagnosed with coronavirus and he is admitted to hospital, recovering, as we understand it, from the illness over the next 14 days. And the question is whether or not that broader advice, which says to the community, if you've been in close contact with someone who has coronavirus, should be extended to the Cabinet room, given they met on Tuesday, just a few days before we got confirmation yesterday that Peter Dutton is in fact ill. Now, the advice that the Prime Minister has been relying on, he says, from the Chief Medical Officer, is that it's only the preceding 24 hours before symptoms emerge that members of the front bench need to be concerned about, and given this Cabinet meeting was a few days earlier, it's not an issue. However, Chris Bowen says that that is not clear to the public. It's a different message in his view from what everybody else is getting, and he's questioned why it is that the government is not taking the same measures of self-quarantine that they are asking of the community.
Of course, we have the news that Peter Dutton has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Now, of course, we wish him the best. This is not a pleasant disease and, he's in our thoughts. We wish him all the very best and his family. I've been concerned about the mixed messaging and the apparent inconsistency about the approach that the Prime Minister and Cabinet are taking, which is different to the approach recommended to members of the public.
Chris Bowen there. So, Anna, has the Prime Minister responded so far?
We had that initial press release from the Prime Minister last night confirming obviously that he was aware of Peter Dutton's condition and saying that the Cabinet team was not in a position to be self-isolating or needing to undergo additional testing themselves. And then we had that further update from the Prime Minister saying that he would not, after all, be attending that football match this afternoon, that he decided against it because he didn't want it to be misrepresented. But in terms of the latest commentary in response to Labor and also the broader question of how the Prime Minister should be acting, we've had the Chief Medical Officer outline why this advice has been given, why the Prime Minister has effectively been given the all clear from having to go through medical testing off the back of Peter Dutton's diagnosis. And here is Brendan Murphy explaining why it is that he has taken this position.
The Prime Minister was very, very clear to me that the Cabinet and all the public officials follow the exact same public health rules as everybody else in the Australian community. If there had been a requirement for quarantine, he was insistent that government and cabinet followed those rules. So we just followed the normal public health advice. No one had been in contact with the minister in that period.
Professor Brendan Murphy. Now, Anna, the Home Affairs Minister, he did indeed have quite a busy schedule in the lead up to his diagnosis. Just where has he been?
So, firstly, we know that Peter Dutton was in Washington at the end of the previous week, and he met with the President's daughter, Ivanka Trump. He was also with the Attorney General, William Barr. There's photographs showing them meeting in what seems like close contact, but of course all of these pieces of terminology are now defined in particular ways, as the Chief Medical Officer said. So we know that Ivanka Trump since then did a work from home period of time before being cleared by the White House medical staff of needing to have a further quarantine period or a test. We also know that Peter Dutton came back to Australia, that he went to an event in Queensland at a university, Sunshine Coast Uni, where he was in contact with a lot of members of the university community, and then that cabinet meeting on Tuesday. And we've just had information come through in the last hour from our reporter at that Chris Bowen media conference with images of deep cleaning apparently happening on the floor where Peter Dutton's office is, and also in the general area, because of course that cabinet meeting we understand was held in that building. So it appears that there is a process of extensive cleaning now happening at the Commonwealth parliamentary offices in Sydney to try and deal with any residual issues relating to infection that could arise.
So precautions being taken there. And Anna, how has that wider advice that was given yesterday to cancel large gatherings, non-essential gatherings of more than 500 people from Monday, how's that been received?
The Prime Minister did try to clear up some confusion about this yesterday as to how this applied, and that it was advice as opposed to a ban. But certainly there are different viewpoints on the decision not to implement that change of tack on the question of big gatherings straight away. So the Prime Minister announced that from Monday the advice was not to hold gatherings of more than 500 people that were non-essential and organised. It did not apply to schools, did not apply to universities, public transport or airports. Some schools are self-isolating anyway because of issues with infection in their school community. But generally, I think the government wants to be seen to be acting on the question of the spread of the virus, but not causing mass upheaval in everyday life. At this stage, I think there are various viewpoints, though, on how that's been handled and whether or not it should have happened straight away.
Our political reporter Anna Henderson there from Parliament House in Canberra. New Zealand has cancelled a national remembrance service for victims of the Christchurch mosque attacks because of concerns about COVID-19. Reporter Barbara Miller joins us now from Christchurch. So, Barbara, what reasons have been given now for this cancellation?
Well, the New Zealand government is saying that this is a very cautious approach, a pragmatic decision. They say because of the fact that this gathering would have attracted, one, a large crowd, and two, a number of people from overseas for whom it would have been difficult to work out whether they had been in contact with other people who might have been exposed to the virus. They've taken what they've called this very sad decision to cancel the event. Now, the event had already been disrupted, not because of the virus, but because of rain that was forecast. And it was due, instead of being held in a park outside the mosque, to be held here at this arena where I am now and where the Mayor of Christchurch is about to brief us on that decision to cancel the event. In a statement, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says that she hopes that the people of New Zealand, though, will still take time tomorrow to reflect on those tragic events of a year ago and to recommit to those values that she was espousing in the aftermath of those attacks of cohesion, of tolerance, of unity.
So, Barbara, clearly a very difficult decision made there. How much of a surprise is this news of the cancellation?
Well, look, I guess we shouldn't be surprised given the snowballing impacts of the virus in the rest of the world. It had felt until now that New Zealand was a little pocket away from that to some extent, just a handful of cases confirmed here so far. And yesterday, the Prime Minister, in her media briefing, was really grilled on this and asked several times whether it was possible that this event scheduled for tomorrow afternoon would be cancelled. And she said that she didn't see that happening. She was stressing she was taking the advice all the time. And she attended a very large gathering again here at this arena on the outskirts of town. That was the combined Friday prayers that were held yesterday, also in memorial of the 51 victims of this attack. So clearly overnight they've sat down again, they've looked at this and they've thought about the fact that with people from overseas in particular, and just with the general mood worldwide, they really do need to cancel this event tomorrow.
Barbara Miller reporting there from Christchurch in New Zealand. Now to the United States, where the US President Donald Trump has declared a national emergency in response to the coronavirus pandemic. So far, the virus has spread to 47 states in America, killing 41 people and infecting thousands more. Our North America correspondent Catherine Diss has the latest.
Well, he's called this national emergency under the Stafford Act, which is a tier down from the National Emergency Act. By triggering this particular act, it unlocks some $50 billion of funding, which is around 80 billion Australian dollars, to provide essentially disaster relief. Now, this massive pool of money is controlled by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is commonly called here FEMA. By triggering this act, it gives FEMA the ability to assist local and state governments financially to stem the outbreak of the virus. The President has used this power in recent memory, most recently for flooding in the Midwest and also the wildfires situation in California. So how does it help in this particular instance? Well, it will help state authorities who have been greatly overwhelmed by the coronavirus outbreak better deal with it. It allows FEMA to build makeshift hospitals. It allows them to transport patients and also provide testing kits. Crucially, it will remove constraints on hospitals to ramp up testing, and the federal government has announced it will be partnering with the private sector to speed up testing. And that, of course, has been one of the biggest criticisms to the White House response here on the ground, that simply not enough people were being tested and there weren't enough testing kits available. To put that in perspective, South Korea was testing some 10,000 people a day, and at the same point in time, the United States had just tested 6,000 people. So, of course, this funding will help assist with that. The President has also announced that he will be waiving interest on student loans and that the US would buy up a large amount of oil to put into reserve to try and stem some of those heavy losses that we've seen on Wall Street in recent days. The President just a week ago was calling this coronavirus outbreak a hoax, and today he said that the US response was pretty incredible when compared to the response of countries around the globe. I suppose the judge of that will be whether or not this response has come fast enough to stemming that outbreak, which has now spread to some 47 states here in America. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
The action I am taking will open up access to up to $50 billion of very important and a large amount of money for states and territories and localities in our shared fight against this disease. In furtherance of the order, I'm urging every state to set up emergency operation centers effective immediately.
Today feels like a vastly different situation to what it was on the ground here in Washington, D.C. just a couple of days ago. To give you some colour, I caught the metro into work just 2 days ago, and you wouldn't have known that we were amid a pandemic. But now the streets are fairly cleared. Offices have been told, have shut down. Workers have been told to work from home. As we've seen across the country, country. Tourist facilities have shut down. Disneyland, Broadway, and also national sporting leagues have also announced that they will be suspending their leagues for the time being. We've also seen Louisiana become the first state to announce that it will be delaying its primary vote from April until June, which gives you some sort of indication as to how that particular state sees this epidemic panning out. So I think that we'll continue to see these sorts of measures take place across the country.
The World Health Organization has declared Europe is the new epicentre for the COVID-19 pandemic, which has now killed 5,000 people. Across the continent, a growing list of public events are being cancelled as governments try to control rapid spread of the virus. Even the Queen is staying home. From London, Nick Dole reports.
The Royal Diary is usually planned months in advance, and last-minute changes are rare. But the coronavirus is presenting challenges for everyone, and even the Queen isn't immune. She's cancelled her upcoming public events and the diary's under review. She will still hold audiences with various dignitaries and guests, but exposure to large groups of people is clearly a risk her advisors aren't willing to take. Here in the UK, around 800 people have tested positive, a rise of about 200 in a single day. But authorities say the real figure could be 10,000 or more. At the moment, there are no widespread bans on large public gatherings, but that hasn't stopped widespread cancellations. Mayoral elections have been delayed until next year, including here in London. The EPL and all professional soccer has been cancelled for now. Airlines, of course, are also being hammered by this crisis, including British Airways. It says this is worse than 9/11 or SARS, and it will have to ground planes and cut staff in what it's calling a battle for survival. But every day the situation in Europe's looking more and more serious. In Italy, hospitals are being pushed to their limits and patients have been moved outside those main hospital buildings onto some stretchers. The staff are doing their best to test as many people as they can, but there are now well over 15,000 people infected there and more than 1,000 have died. In Spain, the situation's getting worse with around 4,000 infected and a state of emergency is being declared there.
Europe has now become the epicenter of the pandemic, with more reported cases and deaths than the rest of the world combined, apart from China.
The Czech Republic is taking this situation so seriously that it's banning almost all travel in and out of the country. Denmark is telling its residents that they should stop all travel, and if they're overseas, they should return home as soon as possible. And in Paris, the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower are closed until further notice. Here in the UK, the measures are nowhere near as severe, but authorities say those measures could be ramped up in the coming weeks.
Non-essential mass gatherings of more than 500 people are set to be cancelled from Monday as Australian authorities try to limit the spread of coronavirus. Sport and festivals will be impacted with last-minute cancellations of events such as the Formula One Grand Prix, Melbourne's International Flower and Garden Show and the International Comedy Festival. Meanwhile, Victorian schools prepare to deliver their classes online after Victoria recorded its first case of community transmission.
Last night's AFLW match went ahead as planned, but from today, in this AFL-obsessed state, the league says that spectators will be banned from all men's and women's games for the foreseeable future. That means the games will still be played, but without the usual crowds. The men's season is due to kick off on Thursday night with a clash between Richmond and Carlton here at the MCG. Normally, you'd see tens of thousands of football fans pouring into the G across this forecourt. However, that won't be happening this year. Ticket holders for round one have been told that refunds will be provided for tickets purchased through Ticketmaster and Ticketek, but other ticket holders will be provided with more information about that soon. There's a growing list of major events here in Victoria that have been cancelled. The latest is the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. The organisers have called off that event. Yesterday it was the Australian Formula One Grand Prix that was also called off, with spectators lined up to get into the gates. The Melbourne International Comedy Festival also won't be going ahead. Ticket holders for upcoming shows will be given refunds, but it's particularly devastating for all of the performers and their support staff who have now been left out of pocket. Several comedians have taken to social media to express support for the organisers' decision, but also concern for the impact that this will have on the local industry. The cost to the Victorian economy will be huge, running into the millions. Victoria now has more than 30 confirmed cases of coronavirus, including one of community transmission, where that person hasn't travelled from overseas and hasn't been in contact with a confirmed case. The Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is urging businesses not to panic, but to instead prepare for employees to work from home. It's expected that control measures here in Victoria will be ramped up next week. It looks like more schools will be closed as Victorian authorities and the Commonwealth works to try to control the spread of this virus and avoid a spike in cases that overwhelms the health system.
There's increasing speculation that schools may have to close or change the timing of school term dates. The New South Wales Department of Education Secretary Mark Scott says authorities are looking to implement social distancing policies into schools.
Our current advice is not to close the schools. I think the feeling is that, we've got 3 million children in Australian schools, and to send them out at the moment into, shopping centres and movie theatres and the like to be minded by their grandparents, that may not be the smartest strategy to contain the virus. The work that's being done now, as we all know, is to contain the growth of the virus. Children do get coronavirus, they get it quite mildly. There is concern that they might be carriers of the virus, and particularly if they get it mildly and they may not even know that they're unwell. So this is being reviewed daily by the health officials. The advice might change, but the advice now is for schools to continue operating, but to change the way they operate. And so we're looking to implement social distancing policies in schools. There'll be new advice for schools on Monday, and I think the operations of schools will change. I think we're likely to see no school assemblies for a period of time. We might shift how lunch hours are structured so everyone's not in the playground at the same time. I imagine community events like school concerts and the like might be curtailed for a period of time. So social distancing will apply, but at the moment the schools are still operating. I think it's that the way that schools are structured is that rarely are more than 500 people in one place at one time. And so that's part of the social distancing advice we're going to be providing. So if you have a big school that runs big school assemblies, now's not the time to be doing that. But mainly we know in a school, students are operating in classrooms, and so they're operating in smaller groups. I think schools are still viewed as an essential service, and the Prime Minister was clear yesterday at this stage in Australia we don't have a total social lockdown where all businesses are shut and that everybody has been sent home. And if you look globally, some of those school shutdowns have happened when a decision's been made to shut the society totally down. So you've got the dilemma at the moment that if you shut the schools down, you're really sending those kids out broadly into the community, and very hard for parents who are working and other things too. So the challenge for us is to manage within a school setting to try and not have big crowds congregate and to sensibly manage the social distancing policies.
To news just in, New South Wales public servants are to be entitled to 4 weeks extra leave to help deal with the coronavirus outbreak. We'll be bringing you more information on that as it comes to hand. And if you would like to get more information from the ABC's coronavirus coverage, go to abc.net.au/coronavirus. Now let's check sport with Jared Coote.
The Broncos ruined North Queensland's party last night with a 28-21 victory in Townsville. Just 3 points separated the two sides at half-time at the new North Queensland Stadium. After a few early errors, Valentine Holmes reminded fans why he was so sought after in his return from the NFL. But the second half was all about the Broncos. The visitors raced out to a 19-point lead thanks to 3 straight tries, including a breathtaking individual effort from David Fifita that saw him race 60 metres while evading multiple defenders. Earlier, The Raiders got their season off to a flyer, betting the Titans 24-6.
Yeah, I think it was a great night for so many reasons, but yeah, just not the outcome we wanted. But that's going to happen at different times. Probably our starts to both halves weren't good enough. Kicked out on the full in the first half, and then I think they scored on about the second half too. So yeah, look, I think it's all foreign ground for all of us. I don't think anyone really knows what to expect, and it probably changes daily too. So, but again, that's the same for everyone. So we've just got to get our heads around that and deal with it.
Australia beat New Zealand at an empty SCG overnight. The Aussies snapped a 5-game one-day international losing streak, beating New Zealand by 71 runs. Fans were locked out of the game in response to the coronavirus pandemic, boosted by a 124-run opening partnership between Dave Warner and Aaron Finch. The Aussies posted 258. In response, New Zealand were bowled out for 187. Mitch Marsh and Pat Cummins picked up 3 wickets each, but the delivery of the match belonged to Adam Zampa for a perfectly bowled wrong-un to remove Kane Williamson. Game 2 of the 3-match series will be played behind closed doors on Sunday.
Yeah, it was unique. It was something that I haven't experienced before. Playing cricket for Australia in front of half a dozen people, really, the journos, and but I think all in all it was a pretty good result. Compared to what has happened around the world, I suppose, with sporting events and everything being cancelled, it was great to get out and put on a pretty good show for the fans watching at home.
The NBL Grand Final series has continued without fans in attendance, playing in front of a minimal crowd of just family and friends due to coronavirus restrictions. The Perth Wildcats lost Game 2 of the NBL Grand Final series at home to the Sydney Kings. Andrew Bogut scored 17 points and had 10 rebounds in the first half alone, as the Kings powered to a 97-83 victory. Bogut finished with 19 points and 13 rebounds, while Jayshawn Tate had 20 points as the minor premiers levelled the series at 1-1. The rest of the series will continue to be behind closed doors. Game 3 is in Sydney on Sunday. Scott McDonald's move to the Brisbane Roar is paying off for both the club and player. The Roar's great run of form has continued with a 1-0 win over the Central Coast Mariners. The visitors had the better chances to start the match, but it was the Roar who were the most clinical in front of goal. McDonald scored for the second weekend in a row to move the Roar up to 4th. The goal was initially deemed offside, but that call was overruled by the VAR. The loss was the Mariners' 9th in a row and leaves them at the bottom of the ladder. And Geelong's finals hopes are all but over in the AFLW. The Cats were up by 5 points early in the third quarter of their clash with North Melbourne. That was until Nina Morrison went down with what is believed to be an ACL injury. From there, the Kangaroos scored the next 8 goals to run away with a 66-20 victory. The Roos are 2 games clear at the top of Group A.
Thank you, Jared. Well, that is the latest from ABC News. I'm Miriam Corowa. Thank you for your company.